with our discussion, we're going to talk about notions of accessibility within sound painting and the ways in which it's used in education. Fundamentally, sound painting is not something that you have to be musically trained for or trained in dance or acting. It can be used for anybody and has been, but obviously you've got to be trained in the language. And there's an assumption, and I would assert plenty of transferable skills that you can develop in terms of communication skills. You can develop confidence, the ways to work across the different art forms. So it's got a lot of potential. So Walter, in terms of the sort of educational benefit, in what ways have you used sound painting within an educational context?
Well, I've taken sound painting to all levels of education, going from really like 2- and 3-year-olds up to, you know, university level, and also working with people that have learning disabilities and handicapped people, and working with the blind, and working with people who are hard of hearing or deaf. So I've done it's been a part of my mission as an educator to take sound painting to as many different people as I can. Yeah.
So let's take some of these in sections. Let's start with sort of primary education, so sort of from the 2, 3, 4-year-olds up to say sort of 10, 11, 12 type of age. What ways have you used sound painting, and sort of what reasons have you been invited into those contexts to do sound painting? What is it you're training those pupils to do?
Well, 2- and 3-year-olds are really interesting to work with. You can't use the entire syntax of who, what, how, when with the 2-year-old because it's too much. So, I mean, but you can make a long tone and sing, you know, ooh at the same time, and do that with the 2-year-old, and they'll actually make the sign and the sound. So there's been a lot of studies that say that, you know, very young children, 1, 2 years old, will learn to sign before they speak. So I mean, I think that's true, because my experience with 2- and 3-year-olds is that they go right for it. And the same with pointillism, or the same with doing things like air sound, or even I'll say talk, and even though they're not necessarily sometimes talking, all of these things work, gesture and response at the same time.
So you're getting them to express through play and to actually respond. So even though they might not be able to talk about the syntax, they're still able to read some of these concepts.
Right, and just like giving a child, a very young child, you know, coloring pencils and paper, there's an enormously creative person already inside. We are born as great improvisers. You know, every day we wake up, whatever age we are, and we just reinvent ourselves for that day. Life is improvisation, you know, and you don't teach improvisation. You teach, you know, scales to use in certain types of improvisation, or rhythms and that sort of thing. But everybody, I believe, is first of all equally intelligent, and is a fantastic improviser from day one.
So you're taking the potential of the child at whatever age and saying it's okay to improvise. You're not giving the restriction, you're not giving those shackles and saying no, you can't do. What you're actually saying is offer me something, let's work and see what we can create and develop. So in a sense you're teaching them something about structure, something about discipline, listening to other people, and working together.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly. Yeah. Yes, well said. I mean, that's exactly it. And I'm also fostering their personal creativity. I'm giving them, I mean, sound painting, if you want to speak about education, I like to say it's a language of creativity, you know.
So if we take that further down the field, I mean, of course, I've invited you twice now to London, and you've been in higher education within universities. And as you know, I'm using sound painting not just to train performance, but I've taken it to train choreographers in another way to use the language, but also to train oral skills, understanding of structure, and to think analytically, particularly in terms of music, but what it is we listen for and how those elements work. So sort of at the higher levels, what types of experience have you had? Because I know you've been in a number of institutions in America particularly to teach sound painting.
Yes, in the United States, and in pretty a lot of places in Europe too.
And in
definitely
France,
France, very often in France. And sorry, and your question was...
So what types of training have you done at that level, but also what is it you're trying to train them to do?
Well, really, at that level, I'm offering another way to another environment in which to be a performer, or another environment in which to be a composer, and trying to open up new ways to think about composition for certain people that are in conservatories that are looking to be composers, but then at the same time, to maybe a performer doesn't realize this, and I see this many times in sound painting at any level of education, but speaking higher education, maybe a performer never sees him or herself as a composer because this idea of studying this wonderful age-old tradition of learning how to write and and all the different structures we have to learn to be a composer. Sometimes that can be kind of like off-putting, because it's like, that's another world, I'm playing my instrument, I don't want to go there, it's another whole world, another whole practice. And then along comes a language such as sound painting, which opens up the composer in everybody. Like, everybody's a composer. We all are composers in that sense. We compose our life every day. So we all have the ability to compose.
So it's breaking down these boundaries to make sure you're working with the diversity of skills, the potential of every single person in that room, and saying you can as a sort of a hypothesis starting point, and then seeing what they create. So it's a challenge for them rather than a restriction.
Yes, it's a challenge. Yes, it's a challenge. So even though in some cases I'm going in and I'm working with performers, quite a few of those people that I've worked with in conservatories around the world, many of those young people come out and become composers, live composers. And maybe they learn something about notating or writing text or choreographing or whatever. But their main tool for composition is sound painting, for example.
Now, I find it quite fascinating because as an educator working in higher education, I'm aware of a number of educational theories, and a particularly old one, the Kolb educational cycle, says that you create an idea of something you want to teach, you impose it, you try and pass it on, you reflect how you did it, you consider how you can improve it, and you redo it, and there's this cycle of change. And in many ways that sort of can be mapped on top of the sound painted syntax, that you ask for something that's a question, you give a proposition, you have a response, you work with the response, you give another question, a proposition, and it's all about this constant dialogue that everyone's involved. It breaks down all the sort of categories of who is who, everybody's on an equal playing field. But of course, there's a challenging question. If the fundamental philosophy of sound painting is there is no mistake unless you stop playing, how do you assess it?
Yeah, I mean, that's how do you assess? Like, you're giving a sound painting class, and your institution demands that you assess. That's the way it is today in education. We have to deal with it.
Learning, yeah.
We have to deal with it. And so, how do we assess sound painting? I think it's simple. I mean, I think if the student is, it's not what they're creating. It's the energy they're putting into the creation. So how do we assess it? We assess it that they're good with their signing, their physical signing. They're attentive to what they're receiving. Like if some, just wonderful piece comes out, this wonderful offering comes from a musician or a dancer or an actor, and in the assessment, you're assessing. Well, you're asking them, why didn't you work with that? Why did you even know what was going on? And if they have an answer for you, that's a way to assess, to be able to look at it and say,
they've got to understand the signs, as we might say, we're looking to assess it, do they understand certain chord patterns? Are they listening? Same with ensemble performance, do you have this peripheral listening? Can you work as a team? But at the same time, you've actually got the same skills of, are you playing your instrument correctly? Are you able to be in tune, etc., etc. And you're asking how somebody might structure the performance. Are they aware of where they are in the piece?
Yeah, and how are you able to be in tune? And in this case, for the sound painter, are you able to be in tune with what's coming at you? Yeah. And the professor, teacher doing the assessment would have to, of course, be a very skilled sound painter to be able to understand that, well, that person's not signing very well, you can see they're not really into the piece, the palettes maybe that they've composed are not being used in a certain kind of way that they could be used, and I think there's a number of ways to assess it.
So there's a number of ways currently occurring, because we know between us, as well as myself, colleagues that are using it to train oral skills and to test whether students can hear particular rhythmic patterns, whether they can develop a particular structure. We've also know people that are using it to develop how a student performs, to give them that confidence on stage, to project. But of course, taking it one stage further, you've set up a certification program for sound painters like myself to sort of prove to yourself and the other more established sound painters that the language is being used correctly. So could you say something about the certification process?
Yes, first of all, correctly is what I care about when it comes to, that's the word that I care about when it pertains to the person that says they are teaching sound painting. I've seen it in France, in one situation where someone was teaching long tone like this. It just happened that the children that were in the class knew sound painting quite well and told the sound painter that that was not a long tone. And in fact, that person went to another city and tried to do the same thing, and the children told him again, that that was not a long tone. Unfortunately, he quit. So we created sound painting certification, myself and Francois Genot created sound painting certification to help maintain the language as a universal language, so if you're looking for a job, the director says, what's sound painting? You explain what it is, and they're interested in, and you get a position to have a sound painting course, sound painting class, group, whatever, that you really are a sound painter. So today it's very simple. You can go look at soundpainting.com. If they see your name on the site, you're a certified sound painter.
So in many respects, it's quality assurance that if you have that qualification, you understand the language, you understand the philosophy, you understand the signs, and you are able to train it, not just to perform, because you can be a sound painter performing and not have to do the certification.
I do not care what you do as an artist with the sound painting language. If you want to mix it with other live composing languages like conduction or bom del tiempo, or you want to mix some of John Zorn's Cobra with it, or you want to mix some of the signs of Earl Brown or Anthony Braxton's language musics, or signs Carla Bley might use, or whoever. I don't care. That's you as an artist. I just simply care if you're calling yourself a sound painting, teacher, and you're getting a position in school, in some school, at whatever level. I care that, I created the language. It came from frustration, but it grew into what my life is, and more or less. It's not only. But so I care.
So another challenging question for you. The fact you care is you set the certification because you care. You want the quality assurance using sort of the terms that our educators have to deal with, and we've got to write assessment criteria. So if in 10, 20 years' time, at the moment you can certify level 1 and 2 in music, you've got the multidisciplinary certification for the same levels. Where would you like it to be in 10 or 20 years? Are we talking about equivalents of the associated boards of musicians within Britain, and the graded exams that you can do for performance, where if you've got level 2, everybody's got the same set of skills, that certification process becomes international, therefore it doesn't have to be run just by yourself.
Yeah, I'd like it to get to the point that it goes beyond past that certification to where it becomes, how do I say this? If somebody is going to, if I'm going to go study French somewhere in a university, then probably that university has checked out if that French teacher knows what he or she is doing. Whatever manner or whatever way they use to check that out is what I want with sound painting. Whether it's Francois Genot and I still certifying people 100 years from now, or whether it's another way that something like certification is, maybe sound painting has grown to a certain point, I hope, that it's a tool that continues to be used more and more.
So you do have an aspiration that quality assurance is maintained so that educators
I think quality assurance is maintained, but that the language is still alive and growing, that there is never any group or groups of people that say that, okay, it stops here. This is a tool, it's not a style, but it is a tool that can be used in education or in performance or in all kinds of situations. So I think it's just, you know, it's important that in the end, when somebody wants to learn sound painting, they're learning sound painting.
Okay. Now, one other query, I've done quite, as you know, because you proofread some of the articles and talks on sound painting, particularly talking about the relationship between the different art forms. But the last time I presented in Canada, in Montreal, I had a long discussion about art therapies and the place that sound painting could have in art therapies. So I'm just wondering from your own perspective whether you're aware of any art therapies that use sound painting, whether you've tried it yourself. And I know there's one particular story where using sound painting had an impact on somebody, but sort of what you think and feel and what evidence there is for this being inserted into that sort of clinical palliative art therapy care context.
Yeah, it is going on. I mean, working with people with learning disabilities. I mean, in other situations too, in music therapy, people are using some of the signs in music therapy and whatnot. I know about this because I've given lectures to just, you know, a room full of music therapists. But I've done a lot of work with people with disabilities, and my belief is that, you know, everybody is, you know, creative, and in most of the centers where they teach people with learning disabilities kind of how to get through life and how to do this and how to do that, very rarely teach creativity. So anyway, I mean, now I'm forgetting the question, but I've taken it very much in that direction. But your question again, so I focus.
So how it's been used in music therapies, art therapies, or how it might be?
Yeah, I guess I answered. It was just that it's being used to bring out the creativity in.
Because one of the things I remember us speaking about a number of years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, was a young pupil within a session you did who wasn't speaking, and by the end of it had spoken, but she'd not spoken for a number of years.
Yeah, that's one of the stories I've told a number of times, because I was so blown away with the result. Is to just say it really, you know, succinctly here, is that this little boy, Tim, 10 years old, I was in residence many years ago in a school in Socrates, New York, and I was teaching just an everyday classroom, not music class, of about 40 children, 10 years old, as I said, and I would go in, I was there for 10 weeks, 2 visits a week, and there was a boy named Tim who was a select mute. He hadn't spoken outside of his family to anybody for 3 years. The teacher informed me of this so that I didn't think he was being rude or whatever and address him in any kind of, you know, way. So I saw the first time, I saw Tim, you know, I started the class teaching the children just like I teach anybody. I did basic sound painting, here we go. And Tim couldn't respond because, you know, he couldn't use his voice. He wouldn't make sounds with his voice. He responded some with, you know, things where pointillism, I asked the children to hit the table and stamp on the floor and that sort of thing to create a pointillism. And Tim was able to do that, but he wouldn't use his voice. So the next, you know, a couple days later when I came back, it was 2 visits a week. A couple days later when I came back, he had brought a clarinet in. So he found a way around using his voice. He played an instrument. Now, nobody was able to get him to speak. Nobody. No psychologist, psychiatrist, whoever could get him to speak. At the end of the 10 weeks, do you know where I'm going with this? At the end of the 10 weeks, the 10th week, the 9th and 10th week, I would write on the blackboard a couple of a list of gestures and have each student come up and take 2 of those gestures and do a 30-second sound painting. So a few people came up, you know, and then I said, Tim, you know, you want to come up? And he came up, and I asked him, I said, well, which gestures would you like? And he said, pointillism and minimalism. And he spoke. And I could see, because the teacher was right over here, and I could see her face, like her jaw became dislocated and fell on the table, and she, you know, and I was so touched by it, you know. I kept my cool, but I was so touched I got him to smoke. Got him to speak, you know.
And it's a very powerful example, but it does suggest that, one, there needs to be more work and research done with this, but it comes back to what you said right at the start with why you were doing it. You were taking ownership of the work. You're able, the person at the front as a sound painter can compose, can create, can listen. Because if you're stuck there...
I can't get him to smoke.
No.
We're going to have to cut that out.
We can cut that out. Let's reverse back.
All right.
So remind us to ourselves. Let's just get back. Let's get back to where you asked him what gestures you wanted.
That would be terrible if I was trying to get him to smoke at 10 years old. I mean,
So you asked him
I
to
don't
get up.
smoke, first of all, okay.
So you asked him to get up. Go from there.
So I asked Tim to come up, you know, and I said, Tim, come up, you know, and I said to him, Tim, what gestures would you like? And he said, minimalism and pointillism. And I was just, I didn't say anything to him, like, wow, you spoke, you know, I didn't say any such thing. I just, you know, kept it closed. But inside I was, oh my, unbelievable. And the teacher, her jaw just kind of dislocated and fell on the desk. And I mean, I don't know what I did to get him to speak, except,
yeah.
well, I think that what happened, if I was to make an armchair animal's guess as a psychiatrist, is that I fostered creativity in him. He was able to really be expressive. He hadn't been expressive because he couldn't speak, and speaking is a big part of expression when you're in school. He couldn't express.
It's something about taking ownership, isn't it? When we started the discussion, we were talking about why you use sound painting. It's about creativity, you imposing and developing something with a group of people that become the instruments, in a sense. So rather than having your trumpet, in my case, or saxophone for yourself, that you work with the people, and it's all about forming those relationships. So obviously more research needs to be done on how this could be used, but it's really
and more research needs to be done on the importance of creativity being fostered from the get-go with a child, right from the beginning. And there's not enough done on this, and this is one of the reasons, sorry to cut you off, but this is one of the reasons that I feel that sound painting it's a language of creativity. So if you start very young with a 2-year-old doing this, and by, I mean, it's not an ego trip of mine, but by the time a child, say, is 10 years old and that boy or girl is fluent in sound painting,
they're fluent in multimodal creativity. It's also cost effective in the sense you don't have to have an expensive instrument to do sound painting. You can work with body percussion, you can work with the facilities around you. You just need the knowledge of somebody there to deal with it, because it's communication, because it's confidence building. It's got a lot to offer for youth arts.
Right, and exactly.
Developing the quality in youth arts. So I suppose what we're asking for here is an increase of that type of activity and critical inquiry into how the language can be used.
Yes, and we speak about education and the education system, but education is also broader than that. I mean, if I go, I did a sound painting, and it was a conference in Norway. It was a sound painting with 90 politicians, so to speak. They're different level politicians in this conference in Norway, and I was invited because I'd been funded by the government for a number of years to come and teach sound painting. And I think they were curious, okay, what is this that we're funding? And I went there and I did a small demonstration with the politicians and the public and turned them into a chorus. And a man came up to me afterwards who was 90 years old, never been involved in any kind of performance-based study, and he said, all my life I've wanted to do something like this, and all my life I've wanted to be a part of some kind of creative group, and thank you so much for this. And so sound painting is sort of, yes, in the education system, but sound painting itself is accessible for anybody. Anybody can learn, well, yes, that, but anybody can learn to be a sound painter or to be a sound painting performer. You don't have to be trained in, as you were saying, in music or in dance or in theater or in visual arts to use or to be part of a sound painting group.
I mean, part of the reason for my question, as some of the viewers might know, there's various educational either workshops or strategies that are encouraging young children to sing, to use their voice. It's been proven that you're healthier, your well-being's better if you sing. There's a huge resurgence in Europe of amateur choirs, adults in amateur choirs. Of course, in the UK, there's been the big Sing project, getting students in primary school, high schools to sing. But there's need to foster confidence with the teachers so that they're willing to sing in front of a group. And actually, if you can have the basic sound painting gestures, you can foster that singing ability of the pupils and of the staff with no additional resources required, because of course finances in the age of austerity are being cut and what have you, but you can still achieve a performance and a quality performance as well as the training of transferable skills.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
So more call for research in this area.
Indeed.